Hello,
Hello.
everybody. Good morning. Happy Wednesday.
Happy
White Hat Wednesday.
Right.
Yes.
This will be an interesting topic around the white hat thing. We can get to that soon, but we're talking about GPS and starter interrupt
Yeah.
today. So welcome. Glad you joined us.
Absolutely.
We have a couple of quick announcements. We have next Thursday, a week from tomorrow, we'll be in Vegas, and people can join us in the room.
Did you say session? Thursday next week? Yeah.
Thursday, next Thursday, a week from tomorrow.
Okay. Yes.
Right.
Okay. Yes.
Yep.
I was like morning shows on Wednesday, but yeah, we'll be broadcasting that whilst in Vegas. But the address that Jim's got, first thing, it starts at 9 o'clock Thursday morning Pacific.
Right.
So for those of you who live on the East Coast, that's 9, 10, 11, 12.
Right.
So at noon.
Yeah.
Right on.
So the other thing that's coming up is Michelle's birthday is Monday. So you got that to think about, what you might like to share with Michelle on her birthday. We'll be live on Monday morning.
That's true. Yeah. We're heading to Vegas the day before so that we can on Sunday so that we can kind of just play.
Have a birthday day.
Have a birthday day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So much around that it's just kind of fun.
Yeah.
So White Hat Wednesday and we've Jim actually was this morning chose the topic and
smoked old fashioned.
Sounds good. Lovely, Hugo.
Nice, beautiful.
I'm
Can I come too? I want to be there.
Yeah. Exactly.
I'll buy my own.
So GPS. And that's it's interesting. We posted that, and it's like a couple of different people are like, that's a good thing the great interesting thing to talk about because
and there's definitely a white hat tie in here. So
absolutely.
We'll try to flesh that out. And I think we should take our time around this topic. Let me first lean into the microphone and say we are not attorneys. We are not offering legal advice when we talk about GPS and technology and collections and repossessions.
And this is a conversation though that we have with all of our clients that we're helping get into business. Is this question about GPS and we do typically say check with your state, because there are states that have been creating rules around things like this.
Sure.
And so we don't represent that we know what happens in your state. So that's something you need to look into, check with your state association and all of that. But we thought it would be a good idea to talk about the finer points.
Some of those states have legal resources. If you're in a state that doesn't have a state association, maybe reach out to NIADA. Make sure you become a member there because they've got resources, including some legal support. So these are kind of things that you start to touch on things. And we're really just talking about from an operational policy standpoint. And especially if you think about the white hat element, then, this has been a thing for me. Like I've written articles around this over the years, and I find that people sometimes either misinterpret or do an incomplete interpretation of kind of my perspective on GPS and starter interrupt. So
actually, George, yes, we're going to talk about starter interrupt as one of the things.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the idea here is to kind of break down, if we think about this in the context of when you're a new dealer and you're setting up your business and you're getting GPS devices, a couple of things to think about. First of all, you would want to discuss with your lender. If you've got a lender in the picture, you would want to discuss with them, what their practice policy is and what they recommend, and may have covenants around, GPS and starter interrupt. So, because it is a compliance question, especially state compliance, so when we think about this in a white hat context, I'm really thinking about the attorneys general and the whole thing about the actually automated starter interrupt. So why don't we first go through the three things,
types?
Okay? Yeah. So when you install a GPS, and not every provider maybe has all of these options. So you would just need to discuss it with the provider that you choose. But option number one would be to install a GPS device only that would locate only.
It's just to locate
and
only.
The device itself, the hardware might have the capability to do more, but you might choose to only wire up the
locate.
GPS locate feature. Okay, so there's that option, and we're seeing probably a high percentage. My perception is that probably in the range of 90%, 85, 90% of the dealers out there are doing GPS only. Some are installing a second device, some are using a decoy device in addition to the locate. But the point is, they're not choosing, and maybe I said that wrong. GPS only might be a lower percentage than that. But when you factor in GPS and manual disable, then that number is up in that 85% range, I would say. Is just anecdotally speaking this based on my own perception, based on dialogue with a lot of dealers.
And then there's the third kind.
Yeah. So just I kind of glazed over the second one, which is it's often just an extra wire has to be connected, maybe two, where you have the ability to go into your system and manually, user controlled, choose to disable the starter.
Now it's interesting to hear conversations on social media and other avenues about this, the being able to turn off the starter period, and is so what if they're driving down the highway? It's like it's just the starter, not once the engine gets going. So if you do use that, it's the next time they try to start the vehicle is that they won't be able to start the vehicle.
Right.
So it's not going to disrupt if they're on the road at the time. But I mean, if they're heading to Walmart and it gets hit and they go back out to their car, it won't start.
Sure. So obviously there's a human element to that. So that means that, and we have to have policies around that. If it's going to get disabled, who's got the authority to do that?
Yeah.
If we're going to what's our policy around when do we do that, so that we make sure that we're consistent in that practice?
Yeah.
Because that's the thing that makes me most uncomfortable about that whole scenario. Scenario number two, we'll call it, is that there's still a human element. It still requires some human being at the dealership to go, or these are dealer creditors. So at the finance company or wherever, that has to go in and do that. And I would just want to make sure we're consistent in that. I don't want to not disable somebody if our practice is we do it on day 5 and somebody's off or they're busy and they don't get to it till day 7. That troubles me. Like, I think we have to be super consistent about
So, I mean, in essence, with GPS, there's like GPS only and there's GPS with start or interrupt. And the GPS with start or interrupt have two. One's in the manual and one is automated.
So that's getting into the third scenario.
Yeah.
So like, I think of it, and again, if we've got any GPS providers out there and we say something that's inaccurate or incomplete, please let us know and we'll try to address it. We can speak to it right here. But my experience in working with multiple providers and multiple dealers is that these are really kind of the 3 categories. You either use those first 2, or that last one. When I say automated, it's like a pre-programmed
with the car
disabling.
Yeah.
And this is the one that starts to get into where by state, some states have clamped down and said no more of a lot of them I think have said no starter in a period, automated or manual, no starter disable in some states, I think. So, but really this one is one where, in its simplest explanation for folks who haven't been exposed to that, it's like if your customer pays monthly and their payment is due on the 3rd, then when they make their payment, the system, as an example, might automatically create another 33 days before the system will automatically disable. So next month, if the customer hasn't made their payment, at a certain point, they will start to get, the customer will start to get alerts. It could be an in-car alert.
Whatever.
Some of these are settings, that the dealer can choose. But they get a tone or an alert inside the car. They might get a text message that is alerting them to the fact that your payment is due. And obviously they're aware that if they don't get the payment made, that at some point the car won't start. Okay. So that's an automated thing where it's out of the dealer's hands in a way. It's set up in the system at the time of the contract. And a lot of these, by the way, have an integration with the DMS. So your GPS provider might have an integration of some sort with your DMS. So now it's a question of what does that integration look like? What does it do? What does it allow you to manage in the DMS, and what requires you to go over to the platform of the GPS provider to manage these things? Either way, regardless of whether it's in the DMS or the GPS platform, the reality is that that system is set up in a way that is sort of automatically triggered, automatically activated if the customer gets to be a certain day past. And a lot of times the dealer can stipulate what the grace period looks like. It's, if the payment's due on a Friday, as an example, the car will simply not start on a Monday morning or a Tuesday morning. It's like, these are user settings that the dealer can choose. So I think it's interesting because over the years I've said, I personally don't have a problem with that. And as you and I talked about around this,
we talk about pros and cons, and when we're talking with our clients, it's like, what are the pros and what are the cons? Because all of them have pros and cons. So like, what are the pros and cons? And I know for like the automated, one of the nice things about it is, okay, I like things to be very structured
and consistent.
That's just built in my nature. And so the idea that it's like, it's going to happen at the same time, it's going to do this, and it's going to drive traffic to the dealership more than the dealership, or like communication, then the dealership having to drive communication to the customer, because like, you want your car to start, give us a call, let's get this figured out. So there is some beauty in that. And we've got a lot of questions, and we'll try to get all of them answered as we go along. But there's some beauty in that, because it's like, you don't have to think about it. And it does drive some of that communication, and it's set up so that it's consistent. And when Jim talks about consistency, that's a big piece in like, it is, of being consistent in something in your dealership period. Being consistent.
So there are two big subjects I think we want to make sure and touch on here. So if we think about maybe three, there's the white hat element of this. If those folks who are listening, who understand what we talk about on a Wednesday when we talk about white hat way, and what does white hat way mean? And if I were a white hat dealer, how might I handle a situation like this? It's a little like what we talk about when we work with a new dealer, and they'll ask us about this, which one should we use? And so our answer to them is often, in the form of a question, is like, how do you want to be known by your customers, by your community? So when we go through these things, we really have to ask that question and think about how we want to be perceived by our customers.
Because there can be negatives and positives on all of the things. First off, it's really important as a dealer that you're transparent and you let people know this is what this is, that, there is a starter interrupt or there's a manual or an automatic manual. Starter interrupt. It's important for you to let them know. For me, the predatory part of that is if you let them know and then it's not presented in a way of like, this is to help you. This is to keep, make sure that you remember that we need to make payments, and please, if you hear that tone and you can't, please reach out to us immediately and let's figure out what we can do to be able to help you through whatever the situation is that you've got going on right now. And I think that to me, that's kind of the white hat element of, if you're going to have something like that, it's like, if you hear the tone and, if you can make the payment. If you hear the tone and you can't make the payment, call us.
Yeah. And I think there's another element that I'm thinking of in the white hat context is like the word trust. So we sometimes, as dealers, business owners, we want to be trusted. We want our customers to trust us. In fact, we sort of almost insist on it, or we're offended when the customer, doesn't trust us. Yet this whole scenario that we're talking about implies that we don't trust the customer from the beginning. At the beginning of our relationship, it says, we don't trust you, so we're going to install this equipment on here. And so I think if that's the if that's the angle that we're going to take, and we're in a state that permits start or interrupt, then I think it's really in the phrasing and the language that we choose. Yeah, we have a starter. I'm not talking about the language in the GPS disclosure that tells them about the mechanics and the legalese of how it works. I'm really talking about the messaging to the customer that it gives us an opportunity to overcome this thing about trust. Because take it outside of the buy here, pay here business, outside the car business or car relationship. It's like, how does it, I insist that you trust me, but I'm not prepared to trust you. I mean, how's that work in any kind of relationship? That's not a good balance. And so I think this is the interesting part about this is, do we approach every customer as though we think they're going to take advantage and that we're doing this from that standpoint?
Well, and it's also in the messaging and Tyler just voicing is like, there's a specific form that if you have it, you have to have it signed. Yes. But is that enough?
Right. That's
to
just
have them
covering
just
the
sign a
legalese.
thing and hand a pamphlet, it's covering the legal stuff, but to explain why and what this means and all of those pieces, that's kind of where we get into, if you're going to do it, have the white hat way, is have the conversation. What does this mean?
Yeah. Yes, there is a GPS disclosure, and that covers us legally.
Yes.
We're talking about more than legal here. We're talking about the long-term relationship with the customer. And again, I have said, I don't particularly have a problem with an automated starter disable. I don't have a problem with a manually user-driven starter disable, as long as we're consistent about it and we have clear policy around it. So when I think about the manual starter, I think an interesting way to think about this is, let me be a defense attorney for a minute. And I just, I'm not an attorney. I don't speak legalese, but let me just say that.
He plays one on a radio show,
on a morning show
every once in a while.
Yeah. So it's just kind of fun to talk through it. And let me just kind of be a defense attorney. I've got some dealer client who is being challenged, by an attorney general because of this, automated starter disable. And I'm going to kind of make the case, well, let's understand first the business that my dealer client is in. They're in the business of providing financing to customers who have credit trouble. And it's part of how the dealer is able to provide that solution to a customer who hasn't shown a lot of financial responsibility in the past. I'm using a broad brush, but that's generally the customer that we serve in this sector. So I'm also able to say, Your Honor, the prosecuting attorney or whatever, I can say, if you fail to make your payment on your utility bill, on your electric bill, what happens? If you fail to make the payment, you're going to get notification.
Yeah.
But what's going to happen? And so if I'm the electric company, I can do what? I can shut off the service. It won't get restored until what?
You've paid or made arrangements.
Okay. So, and that practice is being extended across an entire credit spectrum, regardless of the credit performance of the consumer, regardless of their credit score. I feel like my experience is they'll be treated the same. There'll be a practice.
And typically if it's someone that's on the lower credit spectrum or the lower income, that there might be, it's like, hey, let's work with you. There's a program. There's let's work with you to try to be able to resolve this problem.
So let me just take it a little further. Your Honor, if you fail to make your gas, your natural gas payment, if you fail to make your electric payment, what would happen? It was an oversight. You missed it. You were out of the country, whatever you felt. What's going to happen? It gets turned off.
It's turned off.
Well, are you provided any sort of emergency codes so that you can turn that back on if you're in a situation where you're home and it's just, you're risking freezing your pipes? Or is there an emergency code where you can automatically turn it back on yourself? Nope. Well, my client offers that to their consumers. My dealer client does provide that. So what we're really talking about, and now, by the way, we're offering this kind of financing solution to consumers who have not done well with credit. They've not done well in these kind of credit installment arrangements in the past. And so we're trying to provide them a solution. And for a lot of the dealer clients, this is what allows them to feel comfortable extending credit in those circumstances. So again, we're not trying to be attorneys over here. We're just trying to say, let's look at it from a place of, and if if I'm really interested in the customer success, let's look at it through that lens. Like if I really truly have an interest in the success of the customer, and I'm prepared to provide financing even in these poor credit circumstances, but this is part of what allows me to do that. Sometimes it might be, I got a lender in the picture, which my customer doesn't care about, but it's part of how I'm able to provide this solution to you is through having this technology in place. Okay. So I think we can present that to the customer in a way that we can help them understand. And again, there are emergency codes for people who aren't familiar in these scenarios that we talk about. If a car gets disabled, then there is a means for the customer. If they're in a tough situation, mother's, having contractions and she needs to get to a hospital.
Or we're 100 miles away from home and I need to get home and whatever.
Whatever. There can be emergency situations.
There are. Lewis from LinkedIn has piped in a couple of times, and I'm pretty sure that Lewis works in the industry of GPS. One of the things that he just mentioned is when performing manual vehicle disabilities and disables. Thank you. Maintaining consistency and treating all customers equally is of the utmost importance, which, like utilities, everyone's treated equally. It doesn't matter, regardless of factors such as their background, preferences, or circumstances. It's crucial to ensure a fair and unbiased approach in dealing with each individual.
Well, that's the part that's harder to do. And that's why I said it makes me uncomfortable when we bring the human element back into it, because people get busy or somebody's out sick. The only person who has access to the ability to do that is out sick. And so now suddenly we're not being consistent, and we're not. So if we begin to be inconsistent, then I can see why an attorney general might start to have a problem with what we're doing, or some of our customers might end up going looking for an attorney, because that's where we start to, become vulnerable. And now you're starting to understand why I'm a believer in the automated thing. And I would love to be able to make the case on behalf of a lot of our dealer clients, and as a former dealer myself, to say, look, this helps me to not have to hire a lot of collectors. This helps me to allow to provide that service. And the customers I'm making sure the customer understands 100%.
Well, Tyler piped in from Facebook and it's like, I totally agree. The approach should be done in an informative manner, not degrading and not making assumptions that the device will be needed. Most customers respond to the form of, you've got this in here with, I totally understand, but y'all won't have any problem with me. I mean, of course. But yes, having the communication.
Yeah. So I think it's obviously, and this is another thing that can happen, is how consistent are we in closing? What is really said? Yes, the customer, yes, their signatures
there
on the
are
piece of paper.
GPS providers that we've seen that there's a video you can show them. There's some literature, that kind of stuff to send them home with, which is helpful because it does create a level of consistency of this is the thing.
And again, I'm not really thinking as much about the legal. I like the video and supporting the document that the customer signs, because their signature on a piece of paper is not going to mean a lot to just, they signed it, but does that mean they understood it? Does that mean they understand the spirit of what's happening there? So it's like, this is where the white hat piece comes in for me, is how do we make sure that we've expressed to the customer exactly what this is going to look like, so that they can choose. They can choose not to do business with us. I'm not forcing them into a contract. If they don't like the practices that we've adopted and they want to try to get their financing somewhere else, perfectly fine. I don't need to persuade them to do business with me so that I can, earn a sale or whatever. It's like, fully disclose, let the customer understand. I mean, when I say fully disclose, I mean almost beyond full disclosure. It's like, tell them more and make sure they understand, because I think there's an opportunity in messaging, and Michelle knows I'm big on messaging. I'm big on making sure the customer understands who we are, what we're about, why you should choose to do business with us, or why we want you to feel comfortable doing business with us. And so this is about disclosure and making sure the customer, we're totally transparent.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And this is also, we've talked before in the past about, when you go through the process of purchasing a car, there is a lot of stuff thrown at you, and that it is really essential, if you want to give our customers the best chance of success is really helping them understand and like I get it, I understand, I know all of the minute pieces that really will help with success. We've talked before about that welcome call, series of short videos that are sent to a new customer. Just this is one of those things that it's just like, and don't forget, this is the thing, and this is the stuff, and this is what you can do, and just so that you're reiterating the pieces that are part of closing that are the most important for them to remember and understand in a we're informing you, we're here to help. Here's the don't forget that if you ever hear the beep, this is what it means. And if you are having a problem with it's either to remind you to make a payment, because we know some people you forget sometimes, or if you can't, call immediately so that you don't end up somewhere with a car that's not going to start.
Yeah.
And communicate that.
Yeah. And I have to believe that the GPS providers are interested in that solution, that they want the dealer to collect the payment and have the customer be successful. And so I think, when I look at this thing, I think one of my big concerns just about GPS, and part of the reason that, excuse me, there have been times in the past when I've written articles that people kind of draw the conclusion that I'm against GPS, and that's definitely not the case. Like, I think it's
our clients would say, no, that's not the case.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely a proponent of GPS technology. I think it's essential. I think it's another example where technology has moved in our favor during the years that I've been in the industry. And it's something we should certainly take advantage of. And because it is a way to help us provide that solution to customer. What my concern is, and where people pick up on the idea that I might be resistant to it, the concern is that it makes all of this equipment, all three of these options that we're talking about, they make it about the car. And so what is Brent Carmichael's presentation? He's always saying,
collect the cash, not the car.
Collect the payment, not the car. So it's pretty hard to argue that all these things we're talking about here don't make it about the collateral, because when we disable the car, it's like you didn't make your payment, so you don't have a car. It makes it about the car. And so I think that's the problem I see, is that I hope one of the things that we haven't touched on, and I don't honestly know what the hardware and the software allows in these cases, but I would hope that if a customer fulfilled some sort of whatever requirement we might have about, show me some documentation, you got a short paycheck, you can't pay the full amount, get me some documentation, I can grant you some relief, that we've got a process for that, so that, because if we're using this to demand payment, nope, you got to make the payment or else the car does not start unless you make the payment. I will say you can get a lot of payments that way. You'll get payments, but you won't you'll decrease the likelihood that customer makes it at the end of the contract.
Or that they are referring their friends and family, or that they purchase another car from you. And we've had that conversation so many times, that you treat your customer well. That's if you look at it financially, that's money in the bank, because they're going to refer and they're going to come back. And so
that's a whole different subject, really. The thing about being flexible and cooperative and being able to grant extensions and partial payments. And we've talked about partial payments in the past.
There's we've just one more kind of squiggly line piece to this. And there's obviously a couple of straight line pieces that I want to quickly get to, and we're running out of time. A squiggly line piece is, I've witnessed, and we've witnessed, where the ability to locate a car becomes entertainment to a team. It becomes a reason to say you're a liar to a customer, and that is not the white hat way.
No.
And it becomes like, well, I've been watching and they're doing this, and it's like, that's not the point.
Yeah.
That's not the point at all. About having something that people can, people love to gossip, and they love to have something to complain about, and they love, and if that's happening, then if that's happening with your team, your collections team, then you're creating an adversarial relationship with your customer.
Yeah. And this is why we think the quick way to solve that is just, we don't recommend that collectors at a collector level would have access to GPS. That would be reserved for somebody who's going to take some sort of enforcement action.
And not share it.
Yeah, don't share the information with the collectors. Like, that's information to be kept into our management team. And so I think this is an area where we can create some level of consistency. But yeah, it does. It pollutes the relationship. And we get, so as a collector, if I had that information, customer claims that, car's not running, yet they're, 2 counties away driving. It's like, okay, so you have that information now and you're going to use that how? You probably had another customer this morning tell you some other kind of fib, and you're not choosing to act on that because you can't prove it. In this case, you can prove it, but now what? What is that? Why would we choose to act on that? Again, it makes it about the car, and it's about, so it's like, why, my question would be, why would that customer feel like they needed to lie to us? And so, like, that's really the part that I think you have to get to. But I think what we're really saying is that GPS and all this hardware makes it about the car. And if yes, we need it as a backdrop. We need it as a fallback so that if something happens, we can't collect our car.
Yeah.
It's a necessary safeguard. Okay. Or it's an opportunity as a safeguard. I think the danger becomes when we use it to apply pressure and to otherwise, recover the collateral, then that makes it about the car. Just like the electric company makes it about supplying the electricity to your home when they do the cutoff, and then what happens? You make a payment online and the electricity's back on. What happened? They made it about the electricity, right? There was no relationship there. It's very transactional, right? So it's like, that's kind of what I feel like we're doing and with this GPS technology too often. And so I think we have an opportunity. Many of our dealers, we would ask them to recognize the opportunity that is, try to make it less about the car, less about the collateral, more about the relationship, more about that payment, and give our customers an opportunity to feel better about communicating with us and feel better like they're being trusted
as a tool to be able to help them remember, or it's like, we're serious that we need to make the payment. All right. Can we go into straight lines real quick? There's a couple of things. We've had a few questions and all of that. First off, and this is something we were talking about this morning, there are a lot of GPS providers out there. And so one thing, if it matters to you, is make sure that it integrates with your DMS. So, those are like the kind of questions you need to ask.
What's included with that integration? What can you do with that integration?
Yes, what you can do with that integration. And that's, it's one of those things. It's like your DMS is probably your most important software that you have. And so let's try to find things that play nice with your DMS. Second is, there is a lifespan and reliability element to all the different kinds of GPS units. Most GPS, I think all, run off of cell signal. And that means that, if they're out of a range, then it may not be pinging, but the moment that they're back somewhere where it can ping, you'll be able to find them. So it runs off of cell, battery, all of that. Keep in mind that there was about a year ago, a massive shift in cellular technology, where there were certain types of cell that dropped off the face of the planet, which meant GPS units that were running off of that type of cell no longer functioned. And there was a lot of, the GPS providers tried really hard to let everybody know, but that still caught a lot of people unawares. So be aware of that it is a technology changes. GPS units can also be removed from a car that is fully paid off and replaced in a new car. So they can be reused once you've purchased them. And then you just, it's like resetting, you purchase the unit. And then a lot of times there's some kind of a fee that's associated with airtime, keeping it on. We had someone ask cost all across the board.
Yeah. Their devices, their solutions under $100, but I think this is yet another example. And I wrote an article, I think it's out there still on LinkedIn, about that, this is a get what you pay for thing. Yeah, there are more affordable solutions out there for different things, and they're going to have limited features and limited capabilities. So price is not always the only factor here. So I would say you can. I'll try to remember to find it, share it in the threads here, but it's like basically that's what we're saying is it's not just the math. Like, how much more would you have paid for the device when the device that you chose, that was a budget device, won't locate the vehicle? How much more would you have paid for a device that will locate?
And then well, and it's also, they need to be installed properly.
I was going to say that,
and so many people, it's like, it failed. It's like, it's frequently when a dealer says that it's a piece of crap and it doesn't work, it's because it wasn't installed properly by a professional that understands how to install those.
And I'm sure, and you've been around the tech industry. It's like, I'm sure that dealers have experienced this, where you call the support company and then they ask you, how was it installed? Because their first question is, can we be sure? Can we rule that out? Well, and I think as a dealer, I just want to know that I can rule that out.
Exactly. And yes, technology fails. Yeah. But for the amount of time when we work with clients, that it's like, it only works half the time. It's like, who's installing your GPS units? It's likely not the GPS unit. It's whether or not it was installed properly.
Well, but it's also, there's lots of things like geography and cell tower triangulation, all these kind of things come into play. So again, if I had one that wasn't locating, I personally, as a dealer, would want to know that our installer was capable, that they were thorough, that, they were diligent about that, and that we did the best possible job in installing we could, so that I personally could feel like I could rule that out. And if it's not locating, that I can move past that. Because otherwise I can't know. We spend a lot of money and put the time into it. And so it doesn't solve that. So again, I just think, the kind of squiggly lines, as you say, the white hat piece of this is like, let's look at it more. And the last thing I would ask dealers to think about as they're shopping GPS is, as your GPS agents, representatives are walking you through the tools and features of the system, are they giving you features on how to recover the collateral, or are they also giving you tips on how to help the customer be successful and get the payment in? Are they making it about the car, or are they making it about the success of the customer? Because I think you would want to factor that in your decision making, because ultimately I can't believe that the dealer who's listening to us or who's working with us would really want to ever have an account end in repossession. Can't believe they would want that to be the outcome.
I've heard that. It's like, it's not a successful account if we haven't used that car 6 times.
Yeah.
It's like,
so if you're an agent and you're boasting about your network reliability and all these things, okay, well, that helps me recover the car. I get that.
Collect the cash.
What can you help me do is there something you can do to help me make sure I collect more payments than cars? So anyway, enough about all that.
So GPS fans, however it is that it works for you, but if you're going to use it with the start or interrupt, just make sure you're consistent, make sure that you're offering help, alternatives, options for, and that you're communicating that really beautifully. And I had we were talking to someone the other day, because we were talking to someone. It's about elegantly communicating with your clients in a way that's not in a conflict manner. It's in a friendly and helpful manner. And so elegantly communicating with your clients. So GPS, yes. We really encourage you to layer that with the principles of the white hat way, that you're really transparent, and that you're helpful, and that you understand that, even the best of us, like Jim with the utilities, I was out of the country. I forgot to pay the payment. I haven't had access. Your electricity is now off. It's just, things happen.
Yeah. So I can't even make toast this morning because the power is off, because
it depends on whether or not you have a gas stove or a electric stove.
I've never seen gas toasters, but anyway.
Well, you just toast it over the flame.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So excellent. Or we feel like
I think that's good.
We've wrapped up. Thank you so much for joining us today. If there's more that you would like to be able to talk about with GPS, let us know, and we can add a secondary podcast. Or
involved in a suit and you're a dealer in Hawaii and you need expert witnesses, then we can help in Hawaii and some other regions as well. So,
All right, guys, have a great Wednesday, and we will see you on Friday. Happy White Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday.